My sister took over Dad's business and banned our family from it. I stood outside Romano's family kitchen at 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, watching my sister Elena through the front windows as she played hostess to a packed dining room. The same dining room where I'd celebrated every birthday until I turned 18. Where Dad taught me to fold napkins when I was 7. Where our family had Sunday dinners every week for 23 years. Now I wasn't even allowed through the front door. "Sir, are you waiting for a table?" A young hostess I didn't recognize stepped outside, clipboard in hand. She couldn't have been older than 19, probably some college kid Elena hired after she fired Maria, who'd worked the front desk for 8 years. "No," I said, not moving from my spot on the sidewalk. "Just looking." Through the window, I watched Elena glide between tables in the black dress she always wore for important business meetings. She was animated, laughing with the customers at table 12, the corner booth where Dad used to sit every Friday morning, reviewing invoices over his espresso and sfogliatelle. She had no right to be there, playing the gracious owner like she built this place from nothing. Like she hadn't manipulated a dying man into signing away our family's legacy. My phone buzzed. A text from my younger brother Marcus, asterisk still planning to meet tomorrow. I found more stuff in Dad's old papers, asterisk. I typed back, asterisk yes. 2 p.m. at Mom's house. Bring everything, asterisk. 3 months. It had been exactly 3 months since Elena inherited 100% of Romano's family kitchen, and 2 months and 3 weeks since she banned Mom, Marcus, and me from the premises. Her exact words, delivered via her new lawyer, were that our emotional volatility and tendency toward confrontation created a hostile work environment that could negatively impact business operations. Emotional volatility. Right. Because asking why Dad suddenly changed his will 2 weeks before he died was apparently grounds for a restraining order. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app, something I'd started doing every time I came here. October 15th, 6:50 p.m. Elena just seated the Moretti family at table 8. That's the 3rd time this month they've been here on a Tuesday. Used to be they only came for Sunday dinner when Dad gave them the family discount. I paused, watching Elena laugh at something Mr. Moretti said. She's charging them full price now. $43 for the Oso Buco that Dad sold for $38. Dad had kept detailed records of everything, every regular customer, every vendor payment, every family discount he'd quietly applied to longtime neighbors who'd supported the restaurant since 1987. I'd spent the last month reconstructing his system from memory and the scattered papers Marcus kept finding in Dad's home office. What I discovered made my stomach turn. Elena wasn't just raising prices on family friends. She was 3 weeks late on payments to DeMarco's Fresh Produce, our main vendor for 30 years. She'd fired Tony Castellano, our head chef, and replaced him with some culinary school graduate who worked for half the salary. And according to my friend Jake, who still worked in the kitchen until Elena inevitably fired him too, she'd been taking cash payments from customers and not ringing them through the register. The same register Dad had taught both of us to use when we were kids, back when he still believed we'd run this place together someday. I put my phone away and took one last look at the restaurant that used to be home. Tomorrow, Marcus and I were going to start building our case. Elena had stolen everything from us, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated how well I knew Dad's business. The next afternoon, I sat at Mom's kitchen table staring at a shoebox full of Dad's handwritten notes, receipts, and what looked like a second set of books he'd kept hidden in his bedroom closet. Marcus had found them tucked behind a loose baseboard, wrapped in an old Romano's apron. "Look at this," Marcus said, sliding a manila folder across the table. Dad was tracking something he called irregularities starting back in January. 2 months before he got really sick. I opened the folder and felt my blood pressure spike. Page after page of Dad's meticulous handwriting, documenting discrepancies he'd noticed, asterisk January 15th, register short $127 after Elena's Saturday shift. January 22nd, Elena ordered extra inventory from Salvatore's Meats, no corresponding sales increase. February 3rd, customer Mrs. Chin mentioned paying cash for anniversary dinner, no record in books, asterisk. Jesus Christ, I whispered. He knew. Dad knew she was stealing from him. Mom looked up from where she was sorting through a pile of vendor contracts. At 62, she'd aged 10 years in the 6 months since Dad's diagnosis. The deep lines around her eyes had gotten deeper after Elena's lawyer served us with the no trespass order. Your father was many things, but he wasn't stupid. He built that business from nothing. He knew every penny that went through that place. I flipped to the last entry, dated March 8th, exactly 1 week before Dad went into the hospital for the final time. Asterisk Elena deposited $3,400 cash from weekend receipts. Sales records show $4,100 collected. Missing $700. Can't confront her while she's handling so much with my condition. Will address after I recover, asterisk. He never got the chance to recover. There's more, Marcus said quietly. He was 24, 6 years younger than me, and had always been the peacekeeper in our family. Seeing him this angry was unsettling. I called Gino at DeMarco's Produce this morning. They're about to cut off Elena's account entirely. She owes them $8,200 and keeps making excuses about cash flow problems. Cash flow problems? I laughed bitterly. The place is packed every night. I watched her turn away walk-ins last Tuesday. Mom set down a contract and rubbed her temples. She called me yesterday. Both Marcus and I looked at her sharply. She wants to buy out my share of the building, Mom continued. Offered me $40,000 for property that's worth at least $200,000. Said the restaurant needs stability and having family members as landlords creates conflicts of interest. The building. I'd almost forgotten, while Dad had left the business to Elena, Mom still owned the actual property through their joint trust. It was probably the only thing keeping Elena from disappearing entirely with whatever money she could extract. She's planning to sell, I realized. Elena's going to bleed the business dry, then flip the whole operation to some chain restaurant. That's why she doesn't care about maintaining vendor relationships or keeping experienced staff. Marcus pulled out his laptop. I've been documenting everything Jake tells me about what's happening in the kitchen. Elena's been having him work off the books for cash on busy nights to avoid paying overtime. And she fired Lucia from the cleaning crew but kept charging customers the service fee Dad used to pay her wages with. I stared at the evidence spread across Mom's table, years of Dad's careful work being systematically dismantled by someone who was supposed to carry on his legacy. Elena hadn't just manipulated him into changing his will. She'd been planning this takeover for months, maybe longer. We're not just going to the IRS, I said finally. We're going to the State Labor Board, the Restaurant Licensing Commission, and every food blogger in the city who used to write about Dad's authentic family recipes. Elena wanted a war. She was about to get one. The next morning, I was pulling into the parking lot behind Romano's at 5:30 a.m. when I saw Jake's beat-up Honda Civic already there. He'd agreed to meet me before his shift started, but seeing him smoking nervously by the dumpster made my stomach clench. Jake had worked at the restaurant for 4 years. Dad had hired him straight out of community college and taught him everything about the kitchen. This is really fucked up, man, Jake said as I approached. He took a long drag of his cigarette, hands shaking slightly. I need this job, you know. My mom's got medical bills. I'm not asking you to do anything that'll get you fired, I said. Just tell me what you've seen. Jake glanced around the empty parking lot, then pulled out his phone. Elena's been running 2 different cash registers on busy nights. The main system that prints receipts, and this old manual one she brought in last month. She tells customers the main system is having technical difficulties and runs their payments through the manual register instead. He showed me a photo on his phone, Elena behind the bar, taking cash from an elderly couple while pointing to a small black register I'd never seen before. She processes maybe 15 to 20 transactions a night through that thing, Jake continued. Always cash, always tables that don't speak much English or older customers who don't question anything. That's probably 3 to 4,000 a week that's not going through the books. I felt sick. What about the staff? Is she paying everyone properly? That's the other thing. Jake dropped his cigarette and crushed it under his heel. She's got 3 of us working cash shifts on weekends. No overtime pay, no payroll records. Just straight cash at the end of the night. $200 for a 12-hour Saturday shift when I should be making at least $350 with overtime. I did the math quickly in my head. If Elena was skimming $4,000 a week from the registers and shorting staff wages by another $600 per weekend, she was stealing somewhere around $18,000 a month. From the restaurant my father had spent 36 years building. There's something else, Jake said, checking his phone. Elena's been meeting with some guy in a suit every Wednesday at 2 p.m. They sit at the back booth and go over papers. Last week I heard them talking about maximizing value before the transition and something about a target completion date of December. December. That was less than 2 months away. Do you know who the guy is? Never seen him before. Not a food vendor or anyone from the old crew. But Elena always acts weird around him. Like, nervous but excited. And she had me bring them a bottle of the good wine from your dad's private collection. The Barolo he was saving for special occasions. Dad's wine collection. He'd spent 20 years building that cellar, adding bottles to celebrate every milestone, my high school graduation, Marcus's college acceptance, the restaurant's 25th anniversary. Elena was serving his most prized bottles to some stranger in a suit while planning to sell everything Dad had worked for. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, * called the State Labor Board. They want documentation of the cash payments and off-books work. Can Jake help us, *? I looked at Jake, who was lighting another cigarette with shaking hands. If I get you documentation forms, would you be willing to fill them out? Everything you told me about the cash wages and overtime violations. Man, I don't know. If Elena finds out. She's going to fire you anyway, I said. You know that, right? Once she sells the place or runs it into the ground, everyone Dad hired is gone. She's just using you until she doesn't need you anymore. Jake stared at the back door of the restaurant, the same door he'd been walking through every morning for 4 years. The same door Dad had propped open every summer so the kitchen wouldn't get too hot, where he'd stand and smoke his 1 cigarette of the day while watching the sunset. Okay, Jake said finally. But I want protection. If this goes legal, I need someone to guarantee Elena can't blacklist me from other restaurants. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the contact information for Dad's old business lawyer, the one Elena had mysteriously fired 3 weeks after the will was read. I'll make some calls, I said. Elena's not the only one who can hire attorneys. As I drove away, I could see Elena's car pulling into the lot. She had no idea what was coming. That evening, I sat in my apartment with a yellow legal pad, mapping out everything we had so far. Jake's testimony about the dual register system. Dad's hidden documentation of Elena's theft going back 10 months. Mom's building ownership giving us leverage. Marcus's vendor contacts confirming the unpaid bills. It should have felt like progress. Instead, I kept thinking about that man in the suit Jake had described. My phone rang at 9:23 p.m. Unknown number. Danny Romano. The voice was unfamiliar, older, with a slight Brooklyn accent. Who's asking? Name Sal Benedetto. I ran Benedetto's on Mulberry Street for 32 years before I retired. Your father and I, we went way back. Started in the business around the same time. I sat up straighter. Dad had mentioned Sal countless times over the years. They'd helped each other through the rough patches, shared suppliers when one of them was struggling, even loaned each other staff during busy seasons. I heard about what happened with your sister, Sal continued. Word gets around in this business. I also heard you've been asking questions. What kind of word? The kind that says Elena's been reaching out to restaurant brokers. Corporate types looking to buy established neighborhood places and turn them into something else. Sal paused. I got a call today from a broker asking about Romano's reputation, how long your dad had been established, what kind of customer base he built up. My stomach dropped. Did you tell them anything? I told them to go fuck themselves, Sal said bluntly. But Danny, you need to know, these people move fast once they smell blood in the water. If Elena's serious about selling, she'll have buyers lined up before Christmas. I grabbed a pen and started writing. Do you know which brokerage? Empire Restaurant Group. They specialize in converting family places into franchise opportunities. They bought out Gino's last year, turned it into another generic Italian chain. Same menu as 50 other locations. Empire Restaurant Group. I wrote it down, circling it twice. Sal, would you be willing to go on record about what the broker asked you? Kid, I'd testify in front of the Pope himself if it meant stopping your sister from pissing on your father's grave. His voice hardened. Your dad helped me when Benedetto's almost went under in '08. Loaned me $15,000 out of his own pocket, never asked for a contract, just trusted my word I'd pay him back. I didn't know that. There's a lot you don't know about what kind of man your father was. He kept most of his good deeds quiet. Sal cleared his throat. But I'm telling you now because you need to understand, this isn't just about your family anymore. Elena sells to Empire, they'll get everything that made Romano special. All the neighborhood families who've been eating there for decades, all the traditions your father built, gone. After hanging up with Sal, I immediately called Marcus. Empire Restaurant Group, I said as soon as he answered. Elena's planning to sell to a chain that turns family restaurants into franchises. Jesus. How do you know? I filled him in on Sal's call, watching my notes grow longer with each detail. We need to move faster than I thought. If she's already talking to brokers, the sale could happen within weeks. There's something else, Marcus said quietly. I drove by the restaurant tonight around closing time. Elena was loading boxes into her car. Not restaurant supplies, personal stuff. Like she was cleaning out Dad's office. Dad's office. The small room behind the kitchen where he'd kept 36 years of business records, family photos, and the framed review from the Times that called Romano's a genuine neighborhood treasure. Elena had no right to be in there, let alone removing things. Did you see what kind of boxes? File boxes. At least 4 of them. And Danny, she wasn't alone. That guy in the suit Jake mentioned. He was helping her load everything. I closed my eyes, feeling the walls closing in. Elena wasn't just stealing money anymore. She was systematically erasing Dad's entire legacy, probably destroying evidence of her own crimes in the process. Tomorrow morning, I said. We file everything we have with the IRS, the Labor Board, and the State Restaurant Commission. Elena wants to play hardball. Game on. But even as I said it, I wondered if we were already too late. The next morning at 7:15 a.m., I was sitting in my car outside the offices of Castellano and Associates, Dad's old accounting firm, when my phone rang. Marcus, calling way too early for good news. Danny, we have a problem. A big one. I could hear the panic in his voice. What happened? Mom got served this morning. Elena's suing her for breach of landlord responsibilities and demanding immediate termination of the building lease. She's claiming Mom violated the rental agreement by allowing unauthorized individuals, that's us, to harass and intimidate restaurant staff. I felt my coffee turn to acid in my stomach. That's bullshit. We haven't even been on the property. It gets worse. Elena filed an emergency motion asking for a restraining order that would prevent Mom from entering the building at all. The hearing is scheduled for Friday, that's 3 days from now. Elena was moving faster than I'd anticipated. If she could get Mom legally barred from her own property, she'd have complete control over both the business and the building. Game over. I'm calling Vincent Ricci, I said. Vincent had been Dad's business attorney for 15 years before Elena mysteriously fired him. If anyone knows Elena's legal weak spots, it's him. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Vincent in his cluttered office, watching him flip through Dad's old contracts with the kind of focused intensity that made him worth his expensive hourly rate. Your sister made a crucial mistake, Vincent said, adjusting his reading glasses. The original lease agreement your parents signed gives the building owner, that's your mother, the right to inspect the premises with 24 hours notice. Elena can't claim harassment when your mom is exercising her legal rights as landlord. But what about the restraining order? Won't hold up if we can prove Elena is the one operating in bad faith. Vincent pulled out a thick folder. I still have copies of all the vendor contracts your father signed. If Elena's been defaulting on payments while the restaurant shows steady business, that's grounds for the landlord to terminate the lease for non-payment. I leaned forward. How do we prove the defaults? I made some calls after you contacted me yesterday. DeMarco's Produce isn't the only vendor she's stiffing. Antonelli's Wine Supply is owed $3,600, Lombardi's Linens hasn't been paid in 6 weeks, and the credit card processing company suspended her account twice last month for insufficient funds. Vincent slid a printed email across his desk. This came in an hour ago from Tom DeMarco. Elena called him yesterday offering to pay her entire outstanding balance in cash if he'd agree to forget about the late payment issues and provide a clean reference for potential buyers. I read the email twice. Elena was offering DeMarco $8,200 in cash, money that should have been going to payroll and other legitimate business expenses, just to cover her tracks for prospective buyers. She's liquidating everything she can grab before the sale, I said. That's where the cash is coming from. Gets better, Vincent continued. I reached out to some contacts at Empire Restaurant Group. They're notorious for these quick turnaround deals, but they require the seller to provide 18 months of clean financial records. If Elena's been skimming cash and manipulating the books, she can't produce legitimate documentation. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake, *emergency. Elena fired Tony this morning. Caught him asking questions about the weekend cash shifts. She's cleaning house, *. I showed the message to Vincent. Elena's getting paranoid. She's eliminating anyone who might talk. That actually works in our favor, Vincent said, picking up his phone. Wrongful termination gives Tony legal standing to cooperate with our investigation without worrying about retaliation. And if Elena's firing longtime employees right before a sale, it suggests she's hiding something significant. I felt a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. What do we need to do? File a countermotion challenging Elena's harassment claims. Request a full financial audit of the business as part of the building lease dispute. And get Tony, Jake, and any other fired employees to document everything they witnessed. Vincent grabbed a legal pad and started writing. Most importantly, we need to move fast. If Empire Restaurant Group is serious about buying, they'll want to close the deal before any legal complications surface. As I left Vincent's office, my phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar. Danny. This is Lucia Morales. I used to clean the restaurant. Lucia. Elena had fired her 3 weeks ago but kept charging customers the cleaning fee. Elena called me this morning, Lucia continued, her voice shaking slightly. She offered me $500 to sign a paper saying I quit voluntarily and that I never saw anything unusual about how she handled money. $500. Elena was so desperate to cover her tracks she was bribing former employees. What did you tell her? I told her I'd think about it. But Danny, your father was always good to me. He helped my family when my husband got sick, never asked for anything in return. If Elena's trying to destroy what he built, I want to stop her. I pulled over and grabbed a pen. Lucia, what exactly did you see? The cash register she keeps in the bar. She told me to never clean around it when customers were there. And the boxes she's been taking from your father's office, I saw bank statements, customer lists, employee records. Everything your dad spent years organizing. Would you be willing to testify about what you saw? Yes. But Danny, Elena said she knows I'm undocumented, and if I cause problems for her business, she'll call immigration. I'm scared. I closed my eyes, feeling the full weight of Elena's ruthlessness. She wasn't just stealing from the family business, she was threatening vulnerable employees to protect her crimes. Lucia, I promise you'll have legal protection. Elena's the one breaking federal labor laws, not you. After hanging up, I sat in my car staring at the list of names I'd compiled: Jake, Tony, Lucia, Sal Benedetto, Tom DeMarco. Elena had systematically betrayed everyone Dad had trusted, but her cruelty was finally creating the coalition that would bring her down. Friday's hearing was going to be very interesting. Thursday night, I was up until 3 a.m. organizing evidence files when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I was so wired on coffee and rage that I answered anyway. Danny Romano. The voice was gravelly, older. This is Frank Castellano. Tony's my nephew. I sat up straighter. Frank Castellano owned 3 restaurants in Little Italy and had been one of Dad's closest friends in the business for over 20 years. If Tony had reached out to his uncle about Elena firing him, this could be huge. Frank, good to hear from you. House. Cut the pleasantries, kid. Tony told me what your sister's been doing. Frank's voice carried the kind of authority that made grown men shut up and listen. She fired him for asking questions about cash transactions. That's retaliation, and it's illegal. We're documenting everything for tomorrow's hearing, I said. Vincent Ricci thinks. Forget tomorrow's hearing. You got bigger problems. Frank paused, and I could hear him lighting what sounded like a cigar. Elena called me tonight. Wanted to know if I was interested in buying Romano's equipment before she restructured the business model. My blood went cold. Equipment? Your father's custom wood-fired pizza oven. The espresso machine he imported from Italy in '92. The pasta maker that's been in your family for 15 years. Frank's voice hardened. She's liquidating everything, Danny. And she's doing it fast. I grabbed my laptop and started typing notes. Did she mention any timeline? She wants everything gone by Monday. Offered me a package deal for $60,000 on equipment that's worth at least twice that much. Frank took a long drag of his cigar. I told her I'd think about it, but Danny, if she's selling the equipment, that restaurant's done. You can't run an Italian kitchen without proper tools. Elena wasn't just planning to sell to Empire Restaurant Group. She was stripping everything of value first, probably planning to pocket the equipment money on top of whatever Empire paid for the business itself. By the time the sale went through, there'd be nothing left of Dad's restaurant except empty walls and his good reputation. Frank, would you be willing to testify that Elena offered to sell you the equipment? If we can prove she's liquidating assets without proper legal authority. Already talked to my lawyer about it. Your sister doesn't have the right to sell equipment that was purchased with business funds, especially if there are outstanding debts to vendors. Frank paused. But here's what really pisses me off. She told me your dad never understood modern restaurant economics and that all his old-fashioned equipment was holding back profitability. I felt something snap inside my chest. Dad had researched every piece of equipment for months before buying it. That wood-fired oven had been his pride and joy, installed after the restaurant's best year ever. He brought Marcus and me to watch the installation, explaining how the authentic Italian design would make Romano's pizza better than any chain restaurant could ever manage. She has no right to talk about Dad that way. Damn straight she doesn't. Your father was old school, but he knew quality. That oven alone brings in 30% more revenue than a standard gas unit because customers can taste the difference. Frank's voice carried decades of respect for craftsmanship. Elena's about to destroy something irreplaceable for quick cash. I was typing furiously, trying to capture every detail. Is there any way to legally block the equipment sale? Vincent Ricci's your best bet. If he can get an emergency injunction claiming the equipment is collateral for outstanding business debts, Elena can't touch it until the financial audit is complete. Frank paused again. But Danny, you need to understand something. Even if you stop the equipment sale, even if you prove she's been stealing, your sister's already destroyed the most important thing. What do you mean? Trust. Your father spent 36 years building relationships with customers, vendors, staff. People came to Romano's because they knew what to expect: quality food, fair prices, family atmosphere. Elena's broken all of that in 3 months. Frank's voice grew sad. Even if you get the restaurant back, it'll take years to rebuild what she's torn down. After hanging up with Frank, I called Vincent Ricci's emergency line. Elena's liquidating the equipment, I said as soon as he answered. She's trying to sell everything before Monday. Son of a bitch, Vincent muttered. I could hear him typing in the background. That changes tomorrow's strategy completely. If she's disposing of business assets while defaulting on vendor payments, that's fraudulent transfer. I can file for an emergency asset freeze first thing in the morning. Will it hold up? If we can prove the equipment sales are designed to defraud creditors, absolutely. And Danny, this actually strengthens your mother's position as landlord. Elena can't claim she's operating a legitimate restaurant business while simultaneously liquidating all the equipment needed to run it. For the first time all week, I smiled. Elena thought she was being clever, but she just handed us the evidence we needed to destroy her in court. Friday morning, 8:47 a.m. I was sitting in the courthouse hallway next to Mom and Marcus when Elena walked in with two lawyers I'd never seen before. Not just Vincent's equivalent, these guys looked like they charged $1,000 an hour and specialized in making problems disappear. Jesus, Marcus whispered. Where did she get the money for corporate attorneys? That was exactly what I was wondering. Elena's legal team was dressed better than most federal judges, carrying leather briefcases that probably cost more than Jake made in a month. Someone was bankrolling her defense, and I had a sinking feeling I knew who. Vincent approached us with a grim expression. We have a complication. Elena filed an emergency countermotion at 7 this morning claiming your mother violated the building lease by conspiring to damage the restaurant's reputation through false allegations. Her lawyers are requesting immediate termination of the lease and monetary damages. Monetary damages? Mom's voice cracked slightly. For what? They're claiming your harassment campaign has cost the restaurant approximately $40,000 in lost business. Vincent sat down heavily. Elena's lawyers submitted customer complaints alleging that family disputes have created an uncomfortable dining atmosphere. I grabbed the motion from Vincent's hands and read through Elena's claims. According to her sworn statement, 3 different customers had complained about tension and unprofessional behavior from restaurant management. She'd included printouts of negative online reviews mentioning family drama and hostile environment. These reviews are bullshit, I said, scanning the dates. Half of them were posted after she banned us from the property. We haven't even been inside the restaurant. That's what we'll argue, but Elena's lawyers are good. They're painting a picture of an ongoing family feud that's damaging the business. Vincent checked his watch. We go before Judge Morrison in 20 minutes. She's tough but fair. If we can prove Elena's the one acting in bad faith, we'll win. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, *, this is Jake. Emergency. Don't go to the hearing. Elena knows about everything, *. I showed the message to Vincent, who immediately pulled out his phone and called Jake's number. No answer. Try him again, I said, but Vincent was already dialing. The courthouse clerk called Elena's case number. As we walked toward the courtroom, I caught sight of Elena for the first time in 2 weeks. She looked polished, professional, confident. She'd even worn the navy dress Dad always said made her look like a serious businesswoman. But there was something else in her expression when she saw us, not just anger or determination. Fear. Elena was afraid of something, and people with expensive lawyers who were still afraid usually had good reason to be. Inside the courtroom, Elena's lead attorney immediately requested a private conference with the judge. Vincent tried to object, but Judge Morrison allowed it. For 15 minutes, we sat in the gallery while Elena's legal team huddled with the judge at the bench, occasionally gesturing toward documents we couldn't see. When they returned to their tables, Judge Morrison looked troubled. Mr. Ricci, are you aware that your clients are currently under investigation by the IRS for filing false claims against the defendant's business? Vincent stood slowly. Your Honor, we filed legitimate complaints about financial irregularities. According to the documentation provided by defendant's counsel, those complaints contain allegations that have been proven false through third-party verification. Judge Morrison held up a thick folder. The IRS investigation was closed yesterday after finding no evidence of tax fraud or financial misconduct. The courtroom started spinning around me. Elena's lawyers had somehow convinced the IRS to close our complaint and declare it baseless. That was impossible unless. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, I'm informed that the plaintiff's family members have been conducting unauthorized surveillance of the defendant's business and intimidating employees into providing false testimony. Vincent looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. Your Honor, we can provide evidence. The court will hear defendant's motion for immediate lease termination and damages. Mr. Castellano, you may proceed. Elena's lead lawyer stood and smiled. Your Honor, my client has been the victim of a coordinated harassment campaign designed to damage her family business and force an illegitimate sale. I stopped listening. Elena hadn't just hired expensive attorneys, she'd somehow neutralized our entire case before we'd even presented it. The IRS complaint that was supposed to be our ace in the hole had been turned into evidence of our supposed misconduct. As Elena's lawyer continued his presentation, she turned slightly in her chair and made eye contact with me. She winked. That's when I realized Elena had been planning this moment for much longer than any of us understood. Judge Morrison's gavel came down like a gunshot. Motion granted. The lease between plaintiff and defendant is hereby terminated effective immediately. Defendant is awarded damages in the amount of $40,000, to be paid within 30 days. I sat frozen as Elena's lawyers shook hands and started packing their briefcases. $40,000. Mom didn't have that kind of money, especially not after Dad's medical bills had drained most of their savings. Your Honor, Vincent said, standing shakily, we request an immediate appeal and a stay of execution pending. Motion denied. This court finds the plaintiff's actions constitute a clear pattern of bad faith interference with legitimate business operations. Judge Morrison gathered her papers. Mrs. Romano, you have 48 hours to remove any personal property from the premises. After that, any presence on the property will constitute criminal trespass. Elena stood and smoothed her dress, then walked over to where we were sitting. Her expensive lawyers flanked her like bodyguards. Danny, she said quietly, just loud enough for our family to hear. Dad always said you were too emotional for business. Looks like he was right. Mom grabbed my arm before I could respond, but Elena wasn't finished. Oh, and Marcus. Jake won't be returning your calls anymore. Neither will Tony or Lucia. Turns out people value job security more than old loyalty. Elena's smile was ice cold. Amazing what a good employment lawyer can accomplish. She walked away before any of us could process what she just said. Outside the courthouse, Vincent was already on his phone trying to reach his contacts at the IRS. This doesn't make sense, he kept saying. I've never seen a complaint dismissed that quickly, especially with the evidence we provided. Vincent, I said, interrupting his call. Elena knew. She knew about Jake, about the vendor documentation, about everything we were planning to present. Someone told her. Marcus was staring at his phone. Jake's number has been disconnected. Tony's not answering either. I called Sal Benedetto. Straight to voicemail. Then Frank Castellano. Same thing. They got to everyone, Mom said quietly. She looked older than I'd ever seen her, sitting on the courthouse steps in the October afternoon sun. Elena turned them all. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized Vincent's law firm's main line. Mr. Romano. This is Jennifer from Mr. Ricci's office. I'm calling to inform you that our firm can no longer represent you in this matter. Mr. Ricci will be returning your retainer fee, minus expenses already incurred. What the hell are you talking about? We received documentation this morning indicating a potential conflict of interest. Mr. Ricci represents several clients who do business with Romano's Family Kitchen, and continuing to represent you could compromise those relationships. I looked at Vincent, who was still on his other call, arguing with someone about IRS procedures. Did Vincent approve this? Mr. Ricci is currently reviewing the situation with our ethics board. He'll contact you within 72 hours to discuss transition of your case materials to another attorney. Elena hadn't just neutralized our evidence and bought off our witnesses. She'd systematically eliminated our legal representation and our ability to appeal. When Vincent finally hung up his call, I told him about the conversation with his office. Son of a bitch, he said, then immediately called his firm. For 5 minutes, I listened to him argue with his own partners about conflicts of interest and client relationships. When he hung up, his face was gray. Empire Restaurant Group represents 12 restaurants that use the same suppliers as Romano's. My partners are claiming that suing Elena could damage those business relationships. Vincent rubbed his temples. I've been practicing law for 22 years, and I've never seen anything like this. I pulled out my phone and Googled Empire Restaurant Group's corporate structure. What I found made my stomach drop. Elena wasn't selling to Empire Restaurant Group. According to their website, Elena Romano had been listed as a strategic acquisition consultant for the past 6 months. Elena hadn't been planning to sell Dad's restaurant. She'd been hired to destroy it from the inside. I stared at my phone screen for a full minute, rereading Elena's title on Empire Restaurant Group's website. Strategic acquisition consultant. The words blurred together as the full scope of her betrayal hit me. Vincent, I said, my voice barely steady. Elena wasn't planning to sell to Empire. She's been working for them. Vincent grabbed my phone and scrolled through the company page. His face went white when he reached Elena's professional headshot, the same navy dress she'd worn to court, the same cold smile she'd given us after Judge Morrison's ruling. Jesus Christ, he whispered. How long has she been listed as an employee? I clicked on Elena's profile. According to the bio, she'd been hired in April, 2 months after Dad's death, 1 month after she inherited the restaurant. Her job description made my blood boil, specializes in identifying undervalued family establishments and facilitating acquisition through strategic operational restructuring. Strategic operational restructuring. Corporate speak for destroying everything Dad had built. She played us, Marcus said, reading over my shoulder. The whole time we thought she was being greedy and incompetent, she was systematically sabotaging the business to drive down its value for Empire's buyout. Mom stood up from the courthouse steps, her hands shaking with rage. She watched her father die while planning to destroy his life's work. What kind of person does that? I scrolled down to Empire's recent acquisitions page. Benedetto's was listed as a successful transition, completed in March 2023. Gino's showed a completion date of September 2023. Both restaurants Sal and Frank had mentioned as examples of family businesses destroyed by corporate takeovers. Vincent, we need to call Sal Benedetto right now, I said. If Empire acquired his restaurant, he might know details about their process. But when Vincent tried calling Sal's number, we got a recording saying the line had been disconnected. Frank Castellano's restaurant phone went straight to a generic voicemail message. They're cleaning house, I realized. Elena's making sure everyone who could expose Empire's methods disappears or stays quiet. My phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender was listed as e.romano@empirerestaurantgroup.com, Elena's corporate email address. Danny. Asterisk, since you're so good at research, I thought you might appreciate the full picture. Empire hired me in January when Dad's diagnosis looked terminal. My job was to position Romano's for acquisition by reducing operational costs and eliminating emotional attachments that make family businesses difficult to integrate. Asterisk. Asterisk, the cash skimming, vendor payment delays, staff reductions, all strategic decisions designed to maximize Empire's ROI while minimizing transition complications. Dad's little notebook tracking irregularities was actually quite helpful. It showed me exactly which areas needed attention. Asterisk. Asterisk, you should be proud, Romano's will become the flagship location for Empire's new, authentic Italian heritage chain. We're projecting 300% revenue growth within 18 months once we eliminate the inefficiencies Dad called customer relationships. Asterisk. Asterisk P.S. Jake, Tony, and Lucia all received generous severance packages in exchange for signing non-disclosure agreements. Amazing how quickly people forget old loyalties when you offer them 6 months salary and healthcare coverage. Asterisk. Best regards. Elena Romano. Strategic Acquisition Consultant. Empire Restaurant Group. I read the email twice before handing my phone to Vincent. The casual cruelty in Elena's tone was worse than anything she'd said in court. She wasn't just destroying Dad's restaurant, she was proud of it. This is evidence, Vincent said, screenshotting the email. Elena just admitted to deliberate sabotage and conspiracy to defraud. Even with the conflicts of interest my firm is claiming, this changes everything. Marcus was pacing back and forth on the courthouse steps. But who's going to represent us? She's systematically eliminated every lawyer who knows restaurant law in the city. I thought about Dad's favorite saying when the restaurant faced difficult health inspections or vendor disputes: sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, but you always fight dirty with dirtier. We don't need restaurant lawyers anymore, I said, pulling up a new contact on my phone. We need someone who specializes in corporate fraud and RICO violations. Vincent looked confused. RICO? You think Elena's crimes rise to racketeering levels? Empire Restaurant Group has acquired at least 12 family restaurants in the past 2 years using the same pattern, infiltrating the business from inside, sabotaging operations, then buying at artificially reduced prices. I started walking toward my car. That's conspiracy, mail fraud, wire fraud, and probably tax evasion. Elena isn't just stealing from our family. She's part of a criminal enterprise. As we reached the parking lot, a black sedan with tinted windows pulled up beside us. The passenger window rolled down, revealing Jake's face, but something was wrong. His left eye was swollen shut, and there were fresh cuts on his lip. "Danny," he said quietly, glancing nervously at the driver. "Elena wants to meet with you. Tonight, 9 p.m., at the restaurant. She says it's about making this whole thing go away quietly." "Jake, what happened to your face?" "Nothing. I fell down some stairs." Jake couldn't make eye contact. "Danny, just meet with her, okay? Elena's got resources you don't understand. This doesn't have to get worse." The sedan drove away before I could respond, leaving us standing in the courthouse parking lot with more questions than answers. Elena wanted a meeting. That meant she was worried about something, probably the federal implications of the email she'd just sent. It was time to find out exactly how dirty Empire Restaurant Group was willing to play. That night at 8:45 p.m., I sat in my car across from Romano's family kitchen, watching Elena move around inside the dining room. She'd closed early, something Dad never did on a Friday night in 36 years of business. The parking lot was empty except for her BMW and a white van I didn't recognize parked behind the building. Marcus had insisted on coming with me despite my protests. "If Empire's people hurt Jake for talking, they might try the same thing with you," he'd said. Now he was slouched in the passenger seat, constantly checking his phone for updates from the federal attorney I'd contacted that afternoon. "Teresa Martinez's office called back," Marcus said, showing me his screen. "She wants to meet Monday morning to discuss the RICO angle. But Danny, she said we need more evidence than just Elena's email." Attorney Martinez specialized in corporate fraud cases and had successfully prosecuted 3 restaurant chain schemes in the past 5 years. If anyone could unravel Empire's operation, it was her. But she'd made it clear that federal prosecutors needed bulletproof evidence before taking on companies with Empire's legal resources. "Elena's scared enough to call this meeting," I said, watching her pace back and forth near the front windows. "That means she's sitting on something that could hurt Empire badly enough to make them nervous." At exactly 9 p.m., Elena unlocked the front door and gestured for us to come inside. Walking into Romano's felt like entering a tomb. Dad's family photos had been removed from the walls, the wine collection was gone, and the familiar smell of garlic and basil had been replaced by industrial cleaning chemicals. "Sit anywhere you want," Elena said, her voice echoing in the empty dining room. "Though I suppose you should get used to this being the last time." She'd changed out of her court outfit into jeans and a Romano's t-shirt, the same shirt Dad had designed for the restaurant's 20th anniversary. Seeing her wear it felt like watching someone desecrate a grave. "Nice email," I said, taking a seat at table 12, Dad's old corner booth. "Very professional of you to confess to federal crimes in writing." Elena laughed, but there was tension in her voice. "Danny, you always were the dramatic one. I asked you here to make you an offer. I'm listening. Empire's prepared to pay you and Marcus $50,000 each to sign non-disclosure agreements and walk away quietly." Elena sat down across from us, folding her hands on the table. "That's more money than either of you would see from inheriting part of a failing restaurant business." Marcus leaned forward. "50,000 to forget you systematically destroyed Dad's legacy." "Dad's legacy was a neighborhood restaurant that barely broke even most years," Elena shot back. "I turned it into a profitable acquisition target worth $500,000. Empire's going to build something that actually matters, a brand that can compete nationally instead of serving the same 30 families' mediocre food for decades." I felt my hands clench into fists under the table. Dad's food was never mediocre. Dad's food was nostalgic comfort for people who were afraid of change. Empire's chefs have Michelin training. They'll create authentic Italian cuisine that can scale across multiple markets. Elena's voice carried the rehearsed confidence of a corporate presentation. "In 5 years, the Romano name will be on restaurants in 12 states instead of just this one dying neighborhood. And you're okay with that? Seeing Dad's name on some corporate chain menu?" For the first time all evening, Elena's composure cracked slightly. "Dad's dead, Danny. He doesn't care what happens to his precious restaurant anymore. But I'm alive, and I have a career to build." Through the front windows, I saw the white van move from behind the building to the street. 2 men in dark jackets got out and positioned themselves near the entrance, not blocking it, but definitely watching. Elena noticed my attention shift and smiled. Empire takes security seriously. Especially when dealing with family members who might become emotional. "Are you threatening us?" "I'm protecting you. From yourselves and from making choices that could complicate your futures." Elena pulled out her phone and scrolled to what looked like a contract. The non-disclosure agreement includes a clause about not interfering with Empire's business operations. "Sign it, take the money, and you can pretend Dad's restaurant never existed." I looked around the empty dining room one more time, at the corner where Dad used to stand every morning reviewing the previous night's receipts, at the bar where he taught me to make proper espresso when I was 14, at the kitchen doors he'd walked through 10,000 times. "Elena," I said finally. "You're going to prison." Her laugh was cold and sharp. "On what evidence?" "Everything I did was legal business restructuring. Empire's lawyers made sure of that." I pulled out my phone and showed her the recording app that had been running since we'd walked in. "Conspiracy to commit fraud, racketeering, and about 6 other federal crimes you just confessed to." The color drained from Elena's face. "Oh, and Elena. Those 2 guys outside. Attorney Martinez has FBI agents positioned around the building. You're not the only one who takes security seriously." Elena's phone started ringing. Empire Restaurant Group's corporate number. They were about to find out exactly how expensive good lawyers really were. Elena stared at her ringing phone for 3 seconds before declining the call. But the damage was done. I could see the panic creeping into her eyes as she realized Empire was already trying to manage the situation. "You're bluffing about the FBI," she said, but her voice had lost its corporate confidence. "Martinez wouldn't move that fast on a case this thin." I kept the recording app visible on my phone screen. Want to test that theory? Keep talking about Empire's business model. The phone rang again. This time Elena answered on the second ring. This is Elena. No, I'm handling it. I understand, but the situation is contained. Her voice dropped to a whisper as she turned away from our table. How could they know about Sacramento? I was careful with all the documentation. Sacramento. I filed that detail away and kept recording. Elena was giving us more evidence with every word. Marcus grabbed my arm and nodded toward the front windows. The two men from the white van were walking toward the restaurant entrance, moving with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested this conversation was about to take a very different turn. Elena, I said loudly enough to interrupt her call. Your security team is approaching. Might want to tell them federal agents are probably watching through rifle scopes right now. It was a complete bluff. Attorney Martinez had told us not to involve law enforcement until we had more concrete evidence. But Elena didn't know that. She barked something into her phone about standing down and too much exposure, then hung up and glared at me with pure hatred. You have no idea what you're interfering with, she said. Empire has resources that go way beyond restaurant acquisitions. They can make your lives very complicated. More complicated than losing Dad's restaurant and Mom's building. Marcus shot back. More complicated than watching you destroy everything our family built. Elena's phone buzzed with a text message. She read it and her face went white. What's wrong? I asked, still recording. Empire having second thoughts about their strategic acquisition consultant. Sacramento PD just executed a search warrant on Empire's regional office, Elena said quietly, staring at her phone. Someone provided them with detailed financial records showing systematic fraud across their acquisition program. My phone buzzed with a text from Attorney Martinez, asterisk got your recording. Moving faster than expected. Keep Elena talking for 10 more minutes, asterisk. Gina Castellano, I said, taking a wild guess. Frank's daughter-in-law is a forensic accountant. She's been tracking Empire's pattern for months. Elena's expression confirmed I'd hit the target. That's impossible. We verified all the Castellano family members were contained. You verified the restaurant side of the family. You forgot about the ones who work in law enforcement and financial crimes. I was making most of this up, but Elena's panic suggested I was close to something real. Did you really think Empire could destroy 12 family restaurants without anyone keeping track? The front door chimed as the two security men entered. They looked professional but nervous, constantly checking their phones and scanning the empty restaurant like they expected trouble. Ma'am, the taller one said to Elena. We need to relocate this meeting immediately. The Sacramento situation has compromised operational security. Elena stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Danny, Marcus, this is your last chance. Take the money and sign the agreements. After tonight, Empire's legal team will make your lives a nightmare. After tonight, I said, still recording, Empire's legal team is going to be too busy with federal prosecutors to worry about us. Through the front windows, I could see more vehicles arriving, not FBI agents like I'd claimed, but local police cars with their lights off, positioning themselves at both ends of the street. Elena saw them too. You son of a bitch. You actually called the cops. I didn't call anyone, I said honestly. But Attorney Martinez has been building cases against restaurant acquisition scams for years. Looks like your Sacramento problem just became a multi-state investigation. Elena's phone started ringing again, but this time she ignored it completely. Empire's going to burn you for this, she said, grabbing her purse and heading toward the kitchen. They don't forgive people who cost them money. As Elena and her security team disappeared through the back of the restaurant, Marcus and I sat alone in Dad's empty dining room, listening to sirens approaching from multiple directions. Elena was about to learn that stealing from family was one thing. Stealing from the federal government was something else entirely. 3 hours after Elena disappeared through Romano's back door, I was sitting in a police station interview room that smelled like burnt coffee and disinfectant, watching Detective Sarah Chin flip through a folder thick enough to choke a horse. Your sister's phone went dark at 9:47 p.m., Detective Chin said, not looking up from her notes. The security team ditched their van 6 blocks from the restaurant and disappeared into the subway system. Very professional for restaurant consultants. Marcus shifted in the plastic chair beside me. Any word from the Sacramento investigation? That's where it gets interesting. Detective Chin finally looked up, her expression grim. There is no Sacramento investigation. When we called Sacramento PD about the supposed search warrant on Empire's offices, they had no record of any such operation. My stomach dropped. But Elena's phone call. Someone fed her false information. The question is who, and why they wanted Elena to panic and run. Detective Chen leaned back in her chair. Attorney Martinez thinks it might have been an internal Empire power struggle. Companies that use Elena's methods tend to have trust issues among their own people. I pulled out my phone and checked the recording from the restaurant meeting. Elena's voice was crystal clear when she'd mentioned Sacramento, along with her panic about documentation and systematic fraud across their acquisition program. Even if Sacramento was fake, Elena still confessed to everything on this recording, I said. Conspiracy, fraud, deliberately sabotaging Dad's restaurant. Unfortunately, recordings obtained under false pretenses aren't always admissible in court, Detective Chin replied. Elena's lawyers will argue you coerced her statements by claiming federal agents were present when they weren't. Marcus ran his hands through his hair. So Elena gets away with everything? Not necessarily. We've got her Empire email confession, witness testimony from Jake before he disappeared, and Attorney Martinez found some interesting connections. Detective Chin opened a new folder. Empire Restaurant Group has been operating under 4 different corporate names across 6 states. Their strategic acquisition program has targeted 43 family restaurants in the past 3 years. 43. Elena wasn't just destroying our family's legacy, she was part of something massive. But here's the real problem, Detective Chin continued. Empire's corporate structure is designed to insulate individual employees from criminal liability. Elena can claim she was just following company directives, and Empire can claim she was a rogue consultant who exceeded her authority. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Danny Romano. The voice was elderly, shaky, but determined. This is Rose Benedetto, Sal's wife. My husband couldn't call you himself because Empire's lawyers threatened him with a lawsuit, but I'm 83 years old and I don't give a damn about their threats. I put the call on speaker so Detective Chin could hear. Mrs. Benedetto, what can you tell us? Elena visited us 3 times before Sal agreed to sell Benedetto's to Empire. The first 2 times, she was all smiles and promises about preserving the restaurant's character. The 3rd time, she brought 2 men who made it very clear what would happen if Sal didn't cooperate. Detective Chin leaned forward. What kind of threats? They knew where our grandson went to school. They knew about our mortgage payments and Sal's medical bills. Elena told us Empire had resources for handling stubborn business owners and showed us photos of 3 other restaurants that had suffered mysterious break-ins after their owners refused to sell. I felt my blood turn cold. Empire wasn't just using financial manipulation, they were using intimidation and possibly violence. Mrs. Benedetto, would you be willing to testify about what Elena told you? I already gave a statement to the FBI this morning. Turns out there really is a federal investigation into Empire, it just wasn't in Sacramento. Detective Chin grabbed her radio. This changes everything. If Empire's using interstate threats and intimidation, that's federal racketeering territory. Elena had been so busy running from a fake investigation that she'd stumbled straight into a real one. 2 days after Mrs. Benedetto's call, I was sitting in Attorney Martinez's downtown office at 8 a.m., staring at a wall covered with organizational charts that looked like spider webs. Red lines connected Empire Restaurant Group to shell companies across 7 states, each one specializing in different aspects of their operation. Elena's phone came back online yesterday, Martinez said, adjusting her reading glasses. Triangulated to a location in Phoenix, Arizona. She made 17 calls in 3 hours, all to Empire corporate numbers. Marcus pointed to one of the charts. Phoenix shows up here too. Empire Southwest Holdings, registered 6 months ago. That's their newest operation. They're expanding into Mexican family restaurants now, using the same playbook Elena perfected on Italian establishments. Martinez pulled out a thick folder. But here's what Elena doesn't know, one of her Phoenix calls was to an FBI informant who's been working inside Empire's corporate structure for 8 months. My coffee went cold in my hands. The FBI's been investigating Empire for 8 months. They started with a tax evasion case in Denver, but it kept growing. Elena's Sacramento panic wasn't completely wrong, there is a multi-state investigation. It's just based in Chicago, not Sacramento. Martinez spread out transcripts of phone calls. Agent Rebecca Torres has been documenting everything from the inside. Elena's operation at Romano's was considered a test case for Empire's expansion into East Coast markets. I read through Elena's transcribed conversations with Empire executives. The casual way they discussed neutralizing family resistance and accelerating emotional compliance made my skin crawl. Dad's death hadn't just been an opportunity for Elena, it had been a strategic advantage Empire had planned to exploit. Agent Torres recorded Elena's call yesterday, Martinez continued, playing an audio file on her laptop. Elena's voice filled the office, panicked and desperate. Asterisk, the Romano situation is completely compromised. Danny has federal connections and they've been tracking our vendor intimidation tactics. We need to implement the Phoenix protocols immediately. Asterisk. A male voice responded, asterisk, Elena, calm down. The Romano family has no federal connections. Our intelligence shows they're working with local attorneys and small-town cops. Asterisk. Asterisk, then explain how they knew about Sacramento before we did. Someone's feeding them information from inside our operation. Asterisk. There was a long pause before the male voice continued, asterisk, if you're right, then you've become a liability. Phoenix protocols include contractor termination procedures. Asterisk. The recording ended. Martinez closed her laptop and looked directly at me. Contractor termination procedures, I said slowly. That doesn't sound like Elena's getting fired. Agent Torres confirmed what that means. Empire has connections with private security firms that specialize in making problems disappear permanently. Martinez's voice was steady but grim. Elena's panicked phone calls convinced Empire's executives that she's lost control of the Romano situation. They're cutting her loose. Marcus grabbed my arm. Danny, Elena's in danger. Whatever she did to our family, she doesn't deserve to be murdered. I thought about Elena's email, her cold smile in the courtroom, the way she destroyed everything Dad had built while wearing his anniversary t-shirt. Part of me wanted to let Empire clean up their own mess. But she was still my sister. Martinez, can Agent Torres warn Elena without compromising the investigation? Torres is maintaining contact with Elena as her Empire handler. She's trying to convince Elena to surrender to federal protection, but Elena thinks Torres is setting her up. Martinez gathered her papers. We have maybe 48 hours before Empire decides Elena knows too much about their operation. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown Phoenix number, asterisk Danny, they're coming for me. Meet me where Dad taught us to make Sunday sauce. Come alone. Trust no one else. Asterisk. Elena was ready to talk. The question was whether she'd live long enough to testify. The kitchen of Romano's family kitchen was dark when I arrived at 11:23 p.m., using the spare key Dad had hidden behind the dumpster for 30 years. Elena had beaten me there, I could smell cigarette smoke coming from the prep area, something she'd never done when Dad was alive. You actually came, her voice echoed from the darkness near the industrial stoves. I wasn't sure you would. I found the light switch and saw Elena sitting on a milk crate between the pasta station and the walk-in cooler, looking nothing like the polished corporate consultant from our courthouse confrontation. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, and there were dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept since Phoenix. Agent Torres called me this morning, I said, staying near the door. She told me Empire's planning to eliminate you. Elena laughed bitterly, flicking ash onto the floor Dad had kept spotless for decades. Torres is Empire. Whatever she told you was designed to manipulate your response. She pulled out her phone and showed me a text thread. Look at the timestamps. Torres knew about our courthouse meeting before it happened. She knew about my email to you before I sent it. I read through the messages, feeling my stomach drop. Agent Torres had been feeding Elena information for weeks, but she'd also been reporting Elena's responses to someone listed in the contacts as Phoenix Control. Torres isn't FBI, Elena continued. She's Empire's internal security chief. The whole federal investigation story was designed to make me panic and run, exactly like I did. She took a long drag of her cigarette. Empire wanted me isolated and desperate so they could control my testimony when the real investigation starts. What real investigation? Elena stood and walked to Dad's old desk in the corner, pulling out a manila envelope. IRS Criminal Investigation Division opened a case on Empire 3 weeks ago. Not for restaurant fraud, for money laundering. Empire's been using their acquisition program to clean cash from drug trafficking operations across the Southwest. She handed me financial documents that made my head spin. Empire hadn't just been stealing family restaurants, they'd been using them to process millions of dollars in illegal profits, hiding drug money in legitimate food service transactions. The Romano acquisition was supposed to be clean, Elena said. A simple test case to prove Empire could expand into East Coast markets without complications. But when you started digging into the financial records, you stumbled onto the money laundering operation. I stared at bank transfers showing Romanos being used to process $847,000 in cash deposits over the past month. Elena, how long have you known about the drug money? Since April. Empire offered me a choice, participate in the money laundering or face consequences for what I'd already done to Dad's restaurant. Her voice cracked slightly. I thought I was just helping them acquire failing businesses. By the time I understood what Empire really was, they owned me completely. My phone buzzed with a call from Attorney Martinez. Elena grabbed my wrist before I could answer. Don't trust Martinez either. Check her client list. Empire's been paying her law firm for 18 months to monitor federal investigations and identify potential informants. Elena's grip was desperate. Danny, I've been trying to protect our family from something much worse than losing the restaurant. Through the kitchen's back window, I saw headlights approaching the rear parking lot. 3 vehicles, moving slowly with their lights off. Elena saw them too and crushed her cigarette under her heel. We need to leave. Now. Elena, if everything you're telling me is true, why didn't you warn us months ago? She was already grabbing her jacket and heading for the emergency exit. Because Empire told me they'd kill Mom and Marcus if I didn't deliver Romanos exactly as planned. The restaurant was never the real target, Danny. They needed our family's reputation and Dad's vendor relationships to establish credibility for their East Coast money laundering operation. The back door burst open as armed men in tactical gear flooded into Dad's kitchen. Elena pushed me toward the walk-in cooler. There's a service tunnel behind the freezer that connects to the building next door. Dad installed it during the renovation in '98. As we crawled through a hidden passage I never knew existed, I realized Elena hadn't been destroying Dad's legacy. She'd been trying to save our lives. The service tunnel Elena led me through opened into the basement of Chen's Electronics next door, emerging behind a rack of old television sets that hadn't been moved in decades. We could hear Empire's men searching Romano's kitchen, their radios crackling with coordinates and tactical updates. There's something else you need to know, Elena whispered as we climbed the basement stairs. I've been copying Empire's financial records for 3 months. Every money laundering transaction, every vendor payment, every threat they made to restaurant owners across 7 states. She pulled a flash drive from her jacket pocket. This contains everything. Bank records, corporate communications, even recordings of Empire executives discussing the drug money operations. But Danny, the real IRS investigation doesn't know this evidence exists yet. I stared at the small device that contained enough information to destroy Empire completely. Why didn't you turn this over months ago? Because Agent Rebecca Torres isn't the only Empire employee working inside law enforcement. They have people in the IRS, local police departments, even some federal offices. Elena's voice carried exhaustion and fear. I've been waiting for someone I could trust completely. We reached the electronics store's back exit, peering through the glass door at the alley behind Romano's. Empire's vehicles were positioned to block every escape route, their men systematically searching the neighboring buildings. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Mom got a call from Elena's lawyer, demanding a meeting at midnight. Something feels wrong. Where are you? They're going after Mom, I said, showing Elena the message. Empire's using the same intimidation tactics they used on the Benedettos. Elena closed her eyes and leaned against the door frame. This is exactly what I was trying to prevent. Empire doesn't just steal restaurants, they destroy families who resist them. I called Marcus immediately. Don't let Mom meet with anyone claiming to represent Elena. Get her out of the house right now and go to the police station downtown. Ask for Detective Sarah Chin specifically. Danny, what's going on? Where are you? Elena's with me, and we have evidence that's going to end this tonight. But Marcus, whatever you do, don't trust anyone claiming to be FBI or federal agents until this is over. After hanging up, I turned to Elena. We're going directly to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. No local cops, no attorneys, straight to the people who can shut down Empire's entire operation. Elena nodded and handed me the flash drive. Danny, when this is over, I know you'll never forgive me for what I did to Dad's restaurant. But I need you to know, everything I destroyed, I can help you rebuild. Empire's money laundering operation generated over $2 million in profits using Romano's accounts. Legally, that money belongs to the restaurant. $2 million. Enough to not only restore Romano's to its former glory, but expand it into something bigger than Dad had ever imagined. We slipped out of Chen's Electronics and made our way toward my car, staying in the shadows as Empire's search teams continued sweeping the area. As we drove toward the federal building downtown, Elena pulled out her phone and made one final call. Agent Williams. This is Elena Romano. I have evidence of a major money laundering operation and I'm ready to surrender to protective custody. 6 hours later, we were sitting in a federal conference room watching IRS agents arrest Empire's entire executive board on live television. The Romano's family kitchen case had cracked open the largest restaurant-based money laundering scheme in U.S. history. Elena would serve 18 months in minimum security prison for her role in the conspiracy, but her cooperation earned her a reduced sentence and witness protection. The $2 million in drug money Empire had laundered through Romano's accounts was seized by the government, then awarded to our family as restitution for the business damages. 3 months after Elena's testimony convicted 12 Empire executives, I stood in Romano's newly renovated dining room, watching Dad's old customers return for the grand reopening. Mom was working the register, Marcus was managing the kitchen staff, and the walls were covered with photos celebrating 36 years of family tradition. Elena had been right about one thing: everything she destroyed, we were able to rebuild. But this time, we built it stronger.